Welcome to The Artist Matters. I'm Alex Rudy, and each week you will meet incredible artists from all walks of life. Filmmakers, writers, actors, painters, musicians, and so many more, sharing their stories to motivate and inspire the creative in you. Whether you're doing it for fun or looking to make a living, this show will help you on your journey to bring out the artist within and letting the world know that your art matters. Hey, welcome one and all to The Artist Matters. It's your host, Alex Rudy. And we are in week number 2 of the Halloween-themed episodes. Yes, indeed. I can't help but want to speak, almost like Count Dracula for this time of year. Because it's so awesome. Everybody's so creative. They're wanting to scare people and create things and just channel that inner Halloween spooktacular energy. And today's guest is someone I've known since he was a little boy. His late father, Bob Ottone, ran the high school radio station WXBA 88.1 FM in Brentwood, New York. And I was a disc jockey there. And met the son, who is our guest, Robert Ottone. His father was Bob, he's Robert. Let's get that straight. And their family loves Halloween. And as years went by, they started decking out their house in more elaborate fashion. I actually went to one, and it was awesome. Their whole front yard was a little walkthrough. They had a casket. They had people dressed as creepy characters and a chainsaw. And Bob, the father, was dressed as Michael Myers. Pretty cool. And Robert was dressed as Darth Maul. But anyway, it was still a fun Halloween. I went inside their house, and everything was decked out, and I loved it. And also on that time, I decided to record an Avengers story called Avengers Under Siege, which was published by Marvel Comics in a series of a few issues where the Avengers get overpowered by the Masters of Evil. And I wanted Robert to record a voice, or 2, or 3, which he did. And his father got to play a newscaster, so I got to get him on here somehow. And I had a bunch of other actors, and it came out so awesome because Robert is a huge fan of comics, even made his own when he was a young lad, from what he tells me in our little chat here. And now he's channeled all that creative energy in publishing his first book. It is called People, a horror anthology about love, loss, life, and things that go bump in the night. And once I saw that on his Facebook page that he posted this, I'm like, what? I didn't know he had this in him. Asked him if he wanted to be on the show. He said yes. And I'm so glad I got him on. This is a really good chat and catching up on things to see how he's grown and just to see that he's a published author now, especially in time for Halloween. He goes into his writing process and getting past writer's block, of course. Why this book? Why now of all times? The most challenging story to write in this anthology. Some of his influences. What he had to go through to get the book published. And lots more. It is such a wonderful chat. And you'll get so much out of this because we're focusing on this one book. That's what I love about this. He's a first-time author, and now we get to focus completely on this one book. So there's a lot of deep conversation about how he made this. And I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it. If you're a future author, aspiring writer, this is the podcast for you. And if you love Halloween, this is also for you. Great combo. So without further ado, blah, let's get into this chat with me and Robert Ottone. I know that guy. Hey, Rob, welcome to the show.
Hello, how are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, great. Thanks for being on the Artist Matters. I know him when he's such a wee little tyke back in the 80s.
That is true.
I remember your dad holding your hand, and you were like up to his middle of his leg. You're so tall.
I believe it. Yeah, he was always cool about having me like around the radio station and stuff as like a little kid. So,
hey, that's pretty fun.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that, but let's begin at the beginning. Where did your journey begin? Have you always been a Long Islander?
I have always been a Long Islander. I'm looking to change that. Yes. Yeah, I've always been a Long Islander. I've always been influenced by Long Island and the the surrounding area and the folklore and the history and just the area in general. It's beautiful. Like, a lot of people are like, we'll go to the beach here or there or whatever. And it's like, well, we have it here. Like, we don't need to go to Daytona or anything like that. We have beaches here. They're pretty nice, So, yeah, always been a Long Islander.
Suffolk County?
Won't always be one. What's that? I'm sorry?
Suffolk County.
Suffolk County, yeah. Yep. Suffolk County. I live in Nassau County now, though. I'm sort of a turncoat. Yeah, I know. Very scary.
Were you always a creative type?
Yeah, I used to draw and write my own comic books when I was a kid, and I was a really god-awful artist. But I always loved to write the stories themselves. So I remember I always did like superhero stuff, and then one day I was like, I'm going to do like a Dracula comic book, or I'm going to do this kind of a comic book, and just kind of start playing around with horror a little bit too. So like even that was like at an early age. Now,
you say comic book. Now, were you writing it as in a script format, or were you writing it in panels like a comic book with your drawings?
I was doing it in panels, and I didn't have any idea of like gutter space or length. I had no idea that the gutters, the thicker the gutter that denotes the passage of time. I had no concept of any of that stuff when I was like 8 years old doing my own comics. But I had a good time. A lot of splash pages because around that time the death of Superman had happened and everything. And I just watched a documentary about the death of Superman, how they wanted to. The closer they got to his actual demise, they just wanted splash page. And I think that rubbed off on me because, I mean, that was like the seminal comic book moment of my youth was Superman dying. But so I did a lot of splash page stuff, a lot of Batman jumping off Zeppelins. I don't know. I was obsessed with Zeppelins. I think probably because of the animated series of Batman, there were Zeppelins everywhere. So like, I was obsessed with that. So a lot of splash pages of him just jumping off Zeppelins while they were exploding for some reason. I don't know why they'd be exploding, but a lot of stuff like that. And they were all awful. I found some I found recently some of the old comics that I drew, and they are terrible. They're just so bad. I had nipples on the bat suit, for God's sake.
Oh, like, no.
Yeah. No. Yep. They were very, very much so the Batman Forever and Batman and Robin bat suits that I was drawing. Awful.
So yeah. Did you create a lot of characters?
I did, yeah. I created the last few characters I created, I'm still kicking around in my head because I'm like, maybe one day I could still do something with them. But I really love the idea of creating my own X-Men, creating my own mutants, because the idea of that is just, it's so easy to just, this guy does this. He's into electricity. This guy can breathe underwater. Like, mutation is such an easy thing to play with in the Marvel universe. So I came up with like my whole little B squad of X-Men that were like almost like the Teen Titans of the X-Men. And I did a lot of comics of them too. And like for some reason, Nightcrawler was like their team overseer because I love Nightcrawler.
He's awesome.
Yeah. So like I grew up mostly Spider-Man, X-Men, Batman, Superman, that kind of thing. Now that I'm older, I'm a D snob. But I did grow up Make Mine Marvel. I had a guy named Stuntman who he was very much a ripoff of the Phantom. And he was he was sort of like a daredevil, like quite literally a daredevil. And physically he resembled Daredevil, but again, crossed with the Phantom. And his whole thing was he executed things that like a normal human wouldn't be able to do, but he was a normal human. Like he was able to, sort of like a Mr. Miracle type character, but very much so human. He wasn't a new god or anything like that. He was one of them, and I started playing around with the idea of like what would a realistic Justice League or a realistic Superman story would be, and it's been done a million times. Like The Boys just pretty much did it, and Brightburn just did the horror version of it. But I had a character, I was calling him Bulletproof for a long time, and I have this like 3-series arch in my head of where he starts and where he ends kind of thing. So every once in a while I come back and I think about these superheroes, and then I'm like, oh yeah, horror stuff. So I always sidetrack myself a little bit.
Any wacky names?
No, nothing too ridiculous. I can't. Oh, there was a girl named Flex. That's probably the most ridiculous one. And her whole thing was her skeleton was bisected in the same way a snake's was.
Oh, cool.
So she was like super flexible, and she was like the face of the team kind of thing, because she was like an attractive girl, and she was incredibly intelligent, and she was the de facto leader, and also like, you know, when they would do interviews and stuff, she was the one they would go to. Yeah.
I got you beat.
Oh yeah?
Nuclear Alligator Man.
Oh yeah. I love that. What's his deal?
I think he was an astronaut, if I remember. I mean, what am I, like 6 or 7 when I wrote him? And he ends up on a planet with like humanoid alligators, and they want to torture him, and they throw him in a pit with these alligators. He gets irradiated, and
awesome.
He survives and busts out and saves his friend and goes back to Earth as a good guy. Okay. He had a cape. Yeah. Nuclear Alligator Man. But anyway.
That's awesome. Radiation is such a, like, when you're a little kid and reading comic books and stuff, you're like, that could give me superpower. And it's like, no, that will just kill you.
Yeah, that's all.
I remember as a kid, because, you know, we all grew up loving Spider-Man, because Spider-Man's like the one who, he's a kid, he's a child.
Yeah.
He's, you know, the one that we connect to as kids. But I remember, this is a true, legitimate story. I captured a spider. I put it in the microwave, and I was like, I'm going to get this thing to bite me. I'm like, I'm going to turn it on. It's going to bite me. I'm going to be able to climb walls. It's going to be sick. I put it in the microwave. I turned it on for like 10 seconds. It exploded in the microwave. And my mom was like, what did you do? And I'm like, I put a spider in there. I wanted to get bit by a radioactive. She was like, that's not how it works, dummy. Like, oh, right now I know. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
We could blame Stan Lee for that. It's his fault.
Yeah. Rest in peace,
Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, man. It's all their fault.
What is it about comic books that you love so much, starting from an early age till now?
I miss the days where it was not cool to like superheroes, where it was like my own private thing. Now it's like, oh, you like superheroes, so do I, and it's like the jock like super. I don't know. Growing up, it was always like a dirty secret kind of thing. Like, I could tell you everything about Nightfall and like who Bane is and stuff. Like that's, you know, that kind of thing. But I think it's along the lines of like modern mythology, right? And that's why I think I gravitate a little more towards the DC pantheon of heroes, because it's a little, you can make the connection between the mythological heroes of the classics of like the Odyssey and the Iliad and stuff like that, and put them in a modern contextual setting. That's what I think I gravitated towards as a kid, these larger than life heroes that like, they use their power for good. They weren't perfect. Certainly not the Marvel heroes. They weren't perfect, and there was a lot of melodrama and stuff, but it was also very real, which was beautiful. And you know, DC, same kind of thing. Like Superman doesn't fit in. He can never be an Earthling. He's an alien. He is always going to be an alien. And if he ever forgets that, Batman's there to remind him. And all Batman is an orphan who turned his trauma into rage and a mission. Like, that's dangerous.